Olá, boa noite a todos. Sejam muito bem-vindos ao webinar de Biosseguridade SanTalks. Desejamos a todos sejam muito bem-vindos. É com muito prazer que a Sanfar Saúde Animal apresenta hoje o quarto módulo do projeto SanTalks. É uma série de webinars técnicos cujo objetivo é abordar as principais tendências e conceitos de biosseguridade e apresentá-los de uma forma prática e objetiva.
Para o webinar de hoje, apresentamos o tema Biosseguridade além da Granja. Pontos críticos a se considerar. Como monitorar nosso programa de biosseguridade. Um assunto extremamente relevante quando falamos em biosseguridade. Teremos hoje conosco o Dr. De Wolf, palestrante da Universidade de Ghent, que é referência quando o assunto é biosseguridade. Aproveitem um momento para a troca de experiências e desejamos um ótimo evento a todos. Iniciamos a partir de agora a apresentação do Dr. De Wolf. Hoje teremos um único palestrante, então teremos a duração de 40 minutos e após esse momento teremos o nosso momento de interações para os questionamentos. Lembramos que há necessidade de estarem logados no YouTube para que as perguntas possam ser enviadas.
Então, damos início à palestra Biosseguridade, Princípios, Monitoramentos e Medidas Específicas, com o Dr. De Wolf. O Dr. De Wolf é médico veterinário, formado pela Universidade de Ghent, Bélgica. Ele tem PhD em Epidemiologia Veterinária, atualmente é professor de Epidemiologia na Universidade de Ghent. Trabalha com pesquisas voltadas para epidemiologia quantitativas e controle de zoonoses, com ênfase em resistências a antimicrobiano, assim como prevenção de doenças epidêmicas e endêmicas com foco em aplicação e medidas de biosseguridade. Ele é autor e coautor de mais de 300 publicações científicas e do livro Biosseguridade em Produção Animal e Medicina Veterinária. Professor De Wolf, seja muito bem-vindo.
Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me to give this talk. I will share my screen. Hopefully this works. If everything is fine, you should be able to see my screen now. Yes. Okay, so the topic of my talk today is biosecurity, as it fits perfectly in this series of presentations. And I'm going to talk on different components. I'm going to start with some principles of biosecurity, and then we're gonna continue with the measurement of biosecurity, and I'm going to focus also on a number of specific measures that I was asked to talk a little bit more about. But let's get started immediately with some principles. So when we talk about biosecurity, we have generally separated them into 5 different principles. And these principles are quite simple, they are quite straightforward, but nonetheless it's good to discuss them and to clarify them. And my first principle is that we always will aim for a separation of infectious and susceptible animals. So here in this graph, you have here at the left side, we have the red pig, which is an infectious pig, symbolizing an infectious pig, and that pig can transmit a lot of diseases, either through direct contact, with other pigs, or through indirect contact with other pigs. And when we think about disease transmission, of course, these direct contacts are by far the most efficient ones. Those are the ones that will go most efficiently. So when we think about taking biosecurity measures, the first thing we will think about is trying to break this direct contacts, or to avoid this direct contacts between susceptible and infectious animals. All these indirect contacts are typically less efficient, but on the other hand, they occur very frequently. You have many different transmission routes, through trucks, to clothing, to footwear, to other animals on the farm, and they all may be vectors or transmitters of infectious agents, and indirectly they can spread the measures to the pigs. So when we think about biosecurity measures, they will be focused on avoiding these direct contacts or avoiding these indirect contacts. So we will try to actually build a wall in between the susceptible animals kept in the clean area of the farm and the potential infectious animals, which is actually the outer world. It's not only animals, it's sources of infection. It can be humans, it can be vermin, can be many different things. So we try to separate them as much as possible, but sometimes we cannot avoid that there is contact. And whenever we have to cross this border, we should take measures. And those are the biosecurity measures. And they can be multiple. There's measures for people going into the stables, there's measures for new animals coming into the stable, there's measures for water going in, for feed going in. And so there's plenty of things that we have to think about to avoid introduction of diseases. Which measures you have to take or which measures are crucial will largely depend on the specific situation in your specific farm. And so biosecurity measures are typically very farm specific because not or every pig farm or every poultry farm is different from each other. And what is also very important to think about when we look at these measures is that biosecurity actually is an attitude. It's a type of measures you have to take every day. So it's not sufficient to do it once a week or once a month or once a year. No, you have to do them every day. So you have to create this attitude of biosecurity. So biosecurity is a lot of things to be done in the head. And it's also important that you realize that when you want to change the levels of biosecurity or the application of biosecurity measures, you have to realize that you try to change the attitude of the farmer or of the farm workers. And changing an attitude, it takes time. You cannot expect that to work immediately. You cannot expect it to work after one advice. And you will have to repeat your message over and over again before it really drills in. Changing biosecurity attitudes requires a bit of time and requires a bit of perseverance to convince people. Another principle, my second principle, is linked to this big table. And here in this table, we see a lot of different pig diseases, and we see a lot of different transmission routes: people, semen, manure, domestic animals, rodents, and so on. And you see, whenever there is a cross, it means that it has been described that this transmission route, for instance, here the domestic or feral animals, have been described as a transmission route for all these specific diseases. So you see, they are variable, as some diseases are, different diseases are transmitted through different routes. But if you look here to the columns, you see that some transmission routes are quite important because they can spread a lot of different diseases. And that's something we also will take into our heads and take into account when we characterize and when we classify the different transmission routes and the different measures to be taken. And if you want to know where these tables are coming from, we have written this book on biosecurity. And in this book, we have listed all the important diseases and all their different transmission routes. We've done that for pigs, we've done that for poultry, we've done it for cattle. And so you can find a lot of information in this book. So that was to introduce my second principle, and that is that not every biosecurity measure or not every transmission route is equally as important. I've talked about this direct contact, bringing in live animals. That is typically a very high risk. We typically say that a lot of diseases are bought and paid for. When you buy animals and you get the disease on top of it, and you actually even pay for it, which of course you don't want to do. So bringing in live animals is very dangerous. So it requires a lot of biosecurity measures. On the other side here, on the person bred, the risk that a person that has changed clothing, footwear, washed his or her hands, but still will transmit an infection through some viruses that survive in your nose or whatever, that is an extremely small risk. So when we have to prioritize on biosecurity measures to be taken, we will first prioritize here at the right side on the important risks, and only later on we'll go to the left side on the lesser important risk. And often people get their priorities wrong. And they put a lot of attention and a lot of interest and a lot of efforts in avoiding these low risks, and they forget or they neglect the high risks that are present. So it's really important to think about the ranking and the importance of the measures. My third principle is about the fact that when we take biosecurity measures, it's not all black or white. It's not either we have the infection present or it is totally absent. There's a lot of infections on a farm, whether it's a pig farm or poultry farm, that always will be present. We will always have coccidiosis in poultry farms. We will always have streptococci or E. coli in pig farms. But what is important is your level of infection, or your infection pressure. And if we can have, with good hygienic measures, we can keep this infection pressure low, below a certain level. The immunity of the animals can cope with it, and they can avoid to become sick out of it. So biosecurity is also a lot about breaking the infection cycle and reducing the burden on the immune system. And then we talk about measures such as cleaning and disinfection, or such as good vaccinations, not always to get rid of infections, but to keep them under a certain level. So when you think about biosecurity, it's important that we're not thinking in black or white situation. Every additional biosecurity measure you take will bring you a little bit closer to the goal of preventing diseases. So sometimes farmers react, yeah, well, I cannot do everything, therefore I will do nothing. And that's not the good attitude. Every additional measure you can take is a step in the good direction. Fourth principle is this one. It says the size matter. And when we think about this, we think about the size of the farms. And the best way to explain this is based on these football goals. So if you are a goalkeeper and you want to keep the ball out, which goal is most easy to defend? Is it this big one, or is it this very small one? And of course, you all understand that it is much more easy to keep the balls out here in the small goal than it is in the very big one. And the same is true for farms. If you have very big farm, you have a lot of contacts. There's more trucks coming in, there's more feed coming in, there's more water coming in, there's more farm workers, visitors coming in. So all these additional contacts are additional risks that an infection will enter your farm. And whenever it enters, if you have a lot of animals present, the likelihood that it will start to spread within the farm is also much bigger. So the bigger your farm is, the more important biosecurity becomes. And that's also why biosecurity has become increasingly important in the last 20 years. That is very much linked to the fact that also the size of the farms has increased dramatically. And in small farms in the past, we could allow ourselves to make some mistakes, and then by coincidence, by chance, we didn't get big problems. Today, in these very big farms, you cannot allow yourself anymore to make mistakes, because whenever a new infection comes in, it can have dramatic consequences. And final principle is that the frequency matters. The more frequently you will take a measure, the more risky it becomes that this measure will transmit an infection. And let me explain this by an example. Assume that you have a truck, a feed truck coming into your farm every week. And assume that this feed truck has a risk of introducing a disease, whatever. I think about a poultry flock and Campylobacter, for instance. Assume that the feed truck brings the Campylobacter on the tires of the truck, and the probability that happens is 1 out of 1,000, is 0.1%. And then you could claim, well, 1 out of 1,000 or 0.1%, that's a very small probability. Why should I bother? However, this effect, this thing is repeated 52 times a year, because the truck comes every year. Well, at the end of the year, repeating this event 52 times, it brings you to a risk of 5% rather than 0.1%. And 5%, that's 1 out of 20 instead of 1 out of 1,000. So the more frequently you repeat a certain action, at the end of the day, the more risky it becomes. And this is a little bit counterintuitive, because those things you do very frequently, you believe they are harmless, because you do them so often and you see nothing happening, but one day it will go wrong. And so those actions you do very frequently, you have to be very careful about. And I'll come back into my specific measures talking about that. So the principles are, we try to separate infectious and susceptible animals. We will rank the measures from important to lesser important. We try to reduce the general infection pressure. The bigger the farms are, the more important the measures are, and the more frequently we're repeating a certain measure, and the more attention we have to take to it. So those were my 5 principles. Let's focus now on a number of specific risks, and one of the risks the organizers have asked me to focus on is on the role of persons, the role of people in transmitting diseases. And yes, people can transmit animal diseases. They can act as a mechanical vector if you have bacteria, viruses, if you have dirty hands or dirty shoes on the dirt on your hand or on your clothes, on your shoes, they can be live viruses, live bacteria, parasites that you can carry as a human. You can also act as a biological factor. It might be that even in humans, some bacteria or viruses can multiply and can be excreted again. It's less frequently happen, but it is possible. And you can also have like a direct contact with the animals. So again, we have to take measures whenever humans come into stables, come into contact with animals. You have to take measures to create a barrier to avoid this transmission. So one of the first thing is that we try to keep persons out the farm as much as possible. Unwanted visitors should stay out, and we do that by enclosing the farm and make sure there is good closed barriers to avoid that people can come in. However, as I said before, sometimes visitors, professional visitors, have to come into the farms, and then you should take some precautionary measures. And there's actually 3 golden rules, and I've put them here in red. And if you do those things correctly and every time correctly, then you have avoided enormous part of the risks. And those are, whenever you come into a stable, you change your clothing, you change your footwear, your shoes, boots, and you wash your hands. And those are the 3 golden rules you should adhere to. Change your clothing, put on a coverall, put on farm-specific boots, and wash your hands. And those are, if you do those 3 things right, you have reduced the risks of introducing an infection on a farm already dramatically. And to do so, we use a hygiene lock. A hygiene lock is a house or part of at the entrance of the stable where you have all the facilities to change your clothes, to change your footwear, and to wash your hands. And when we go into a hygiene lock, we use a certain order of actions. We come in the hygiene lock at the dirty side, and we move to the clean side. And we have a clear physical barrier. Here it's a bench, a physical barrier between this dirty and this clean part. So when you come in, you register your name, the name of the visitors. That's to have a certain tracing back possibility if something happens. But it also is a psychological thing. Whenever you've written your name down, it remembers you that you're traceable. It remembers you that you should take care of the biosecurity. You take off your jacket here and your footwear at the dirty side. You wash your hands, and I cannot emphasize enough the importance of washing your hands. It's something that is really forgotten often. People change footwear and change clothes, but the washing of their hands is something that often gets forgotten. Although it's quite basic, it's quite simple, it's very cheap, but you have to think about it. And to be able to wash your hands, you need good sanitation. And these, if you have a situation like this, of course, this is not going to motivate people to wash their hands. It's rather dangerous to wash your hands here. If it's like this, of course, that's much more inviting to have good hygienic hand hygienic measures. Okay, so next, you cross the bench, or you can also go to a shower. That's also a possibility to have a shower. The added value of the shower is that you are 100% sure that people have changed clothes and that they have washed their hands. On top of that, you can also make sure that they wash their hair, but there you're taking measures that are lesser risky. So for me, the shower is not 100% necessary. If you wash your hands, change your clothes, and change your footwear, you've done actually most what you do. But you can install a shower. Whenever you do install a shower, make sure it's a good one. Here I give you some examples of a hygiene look, where you see this bench, this physical barrier, the physical barrier between the dirty area and the clean area. And it can be quite simple, should not be expensive. It can be very simple, but it's important to have this physical barrier to illustrate, to demonstrate where the dirty area is and where the clean area is. You can use the showers, but these are actually not very good showers. If you have a shower where you walk in and walk out on the same side, you come in from the dirty side, you go into the shower, and rather than to go into the clean side directly, you go back out at the dirty side. And so you get a or possible recontamination. This is already a better one. Here you can go in from this side, dirty side, go into the shower, and then go out on this side, the clean side. It's already better. But what is much more better is to have these walk-through showers. And the showers where you come in from one side, you take a shower, and you go out on the other side. You have a walk-through, you go in from the dirty side, you take a shower, you go out on the clean side. And that is the ideal situation. Okay, so next step is that we go to the clean part of my hygiene log, where I put on a clean overall and I put on farm-specific boots. So it's much better to have farm-specific boots that have been washed and disinfected than to bring your own boots. If you are a visitor or a vet or whatever, an advisor going into farm. So don't bring your own boots, use the boots specifically dedicated to that farm. Alternatively, you can use coveralls of the boots, but these are not that good. So the way you can test it after you use them, you can fill them up with water and you will see how much leakage you have. So these boot covers, it's better than nothing, but it's not ideal. Ideal is to have farm-specific boots. And then these boots should be disinfected also before you really go into the stables, even if they are farm specific. Still disinfect the boots. So all visitors should do that, and also all personnel. And sometimes it seems that the biosecurity measures that you require for visitors are higher than the ones you require for the personnel. Sometimes in some farms, I've noticed that visitors have to go to the shower, but farm workers do not have to go to the shower. Of course, that's not a good way of working. And so everybody should take the same measures, and especially the personnel, people that are frequently repeating and going in and out of the farm, they should be even more strict with the measures than these incidental visitors. This is just to illustrate to you what the effect of dirty boots can be. And you see here from the left side, dirty boots, to the right side, cleaned and disinfected boots. And if we take swabs of these boots here on the left side, these dirty boots, and we see a lot of bacterial growth. Also in these boots that are cleaned but not yet disinfected, we still see some bacterial growth. If we go to the total right side here, we see boots that are totally cleaned and disinfected, and we don't find any bacterial growth anymore. And so you really see the differences in effect. And of course, this is what we need, these cleaned and disinfected boots to be able to walk into the stables. Often to disinfect boots, these disinfection baths are used, but be very careful with these disinfection baths, because sometimes they look like this, and if they are dirty like this, they are not disinfection baths, but they are rather infection baths. So a good disinfection bath, when it's used, you have to use it correctly, meaning that it should be clean water, that disinfectant fluid should be regularly replaced, and it should be sufficiently warm. And that maybe in Latin America is not so much a problem, but in Europe, in several regions of Europe, it's way too cold. And if it's cold, your active effect of your disinfectant will work slower. So you will need to increase the contact time. But the contact time, typically people in those disinfection baths have a very short contact time. It's only a few seconds that they are in there, whereas sometimes you need actually 2 or 3 minutes of contact time before your disinfectant can get up to the full effect. So I'm quite skeptical about these disinfection baths because I see them very often being used wrongly. So it's much better to use farm-specific footwear that are disinfected after you've used it, and then you can put them in a disinfection bath, not for a few seconds, but for a couple of hours. And then, of course, they will be correctly disinfected. When you bring materials into your farm, you also have to realize be aware of the fact that also these materials can be contaminated, and even there we have some solutions where you can have these systems where you put in a material on one side, it goes through a UV light, and this UV light has a disinfectant activity, and on the other side you can take the materials out of the system and bring them into your farm. A specific word about this downtime. And in my introduction, when I talked about the principles, I said that the likelihood that some bacteria viruses will survive in the nose of people for multiple hours or even days is very, very low. So this downtime of 24 hours or 48 hours is actually based on very little scientific knowledge behind. And the idea that you have to be 48 hours pig-free before you can visit a next pig farm, or 48 hours poultry-free before you can go to the next poultry farm. It's much more a symbolic measure than a truly scientifically based measure. Whenever you do so it will discourage unwanted visitors, but you should not expect an additional benefit of this downtime. As long as you adhere to the biosecurity measures, and I repeat once more, those are change your clothing, change your footwear, wash your hands. If you do those three things very carefully, adding another 48-hour downtime will not really help. And the downtime should certainly not be a substitute for your biosecurity measures. Because if you have a 48-hour downtime and then after you come into the farm with dirty clothes without having even washed your hands, or with dirty footwear, the 48 hours is not enough. It should be 6 months. And because there's, as long as the bacteria, the viruses are covered by mud, by dirt, by organic material, and they can survive sometimes up to weeks or months. So downtime should not be a replacement of the basic biosecurity measures. And whenever you've applied the basic biosecurity measures, this additional downtime does not help very much, besides your psychological effect. So with regard to humans and transmission of disease by humans, the take-home messages are everyone that comes into contact with animals should wear farm-specific and clean clothing, should wear farm-specific and clean and disinfected footwear, and should wash their hands. So I've now repeated it sufficiently by 3 golden rules. So a few words about trucks as well. Trucks, besides people, also trucks come into your farm, and also these trucks, and they may transmit diseases. So yeah, the basic principles is that trucks should be clean and disinfected when they come to your farm. Ideally, they are empty. So the trucks that are coming in are empty if they come and take pigs from your farm to move them away. So then if they're empty and cleaned and disinfected, the risks are very small. If a truck comes to your farm that is already half filled with animals coming from another farm, of course, then that's an extremely dangerous truck. In that situation, it's better to keep the truck outside of your farm and bring the animals to the truck instead of bringing the truck to the animals. So that can, in some cases, be an option. Ideally, you only allow empty trucks to come to your farm. It's also important to keep the trucks into the dirty area of the farm. I don't have the sufficient time here now to explain the full principle of the clean and the dirty area, but the idea is that we separate the farm in different zones. The clean zone where your animals are, and the dirty zone is where all the external people, visitors, trucks can come. As long as the trucks stay in the dirty zone, they are of lower risk of contaminating your animals. What is also important is that the driver of the truck, that you take good care of this person. Also, he or she might be contaminated. So when a truck driver comes to the farm, the truck driver should not be allowed to go into the stables. He or she should stay out of the stables because this truck farmer, this truck driver has potentially been in contact with other animals before and may be contaminated through his clothes or his shoes or his hands and may transmit diseases. If we think about cleaning and disinfecting the trucks, we should think about the 7 steps of a good cleaning and disinfection protocol. Again, I can talk for a long time about these 7 steps, but I've just summarized them here for you because I don't have a lot of time. But what are my 7 steps of good cleaning and disinfection? The first one is to remove all organic material. You cannot disinfect a dirty surface. And that's also the case for trucks. If you start to disinfect surfaces that are still very dirty, your disinfection will not work very good. So first, remove organic material. Secondly, wash the truck or soak it with a detergent, with soap. You cannot underestimate the importance of soap. Soap is really important to loosen all the materials, to break down the fatty layers, to allow to get rid of everything. And then we do a high pressure cleaning of the truck, the inside, the outside. We allow the truck to dry, and only then we go in for disinfection. It is typically the aim to avoid to disinfect wet surfaces. So first have the truck been dried and only then do a disinfection step. After this disinfection, there is another drying step to avoid that the animals come into a humid truck where there is some residues of disinfected products. And then finally, ideally, we do also a testing of the quality of our cleaning and disinfection process. It takes a bit of time, a bit of work, but it's important to do cleaning and disinfection properly. And to show you, I have a study here where we did sampling in a poultry farm before the cleaning, and then we find about 80,000 bacteria on a square centimeter. A square centimeter, we can find 10 to the fifth bacteria per square centimeter. Well, after the cleaning, this has reduced to 800 bacteria per square centimeter. So that's a reduction with a factor of 100. And we have 99% of the bacteria are removed simply by cleaning. And so cleaning is a very, very important step. And then secondly, after the cleaning, we do a disinfection. And with this disinfection, we go down to 25 bacteria per square centimeter. And we use this bacteria also as a proxy for what we find with viruses. We see comparable reduction levels also with viruses. So we come from 80,000 and we end with 25 bacteria per square centimeter. So what do we learn from this? Two things. First of all, is that even after good cleaning and disinfection, we still do not have a sterile situation. And so it's important to realize that even if you clean and disinfect, there are still some residues of infectious agents that can be present. It's utopia to think that we can breed animals in sterile conditions. It is the second thing we learn is that the cleaning, again, that you first need a good cleaning step before you can do a good disinfection step. And this is an example from poultry stable, but the same holds true also for trucks. I very often see application of disinfectant material on dirty trucks. And we know that that doesn't really work very well. At first, you should clean the truck and then you can do your disinfection. Okay, this already brings me to my final part of my presentation. And that's where I'm gonna present to you the biocheck.ugent system. And that is a biosecurity scoring tool that we have developed to quantify biosecurity. And as was already mentioned in the introduction, the quantification of biosecurity is quite important. How well are my measures implied on the field? How can I measure it? And because if you cannot measure it, you cannot improve it. And in the past, we had no tool available to measure biosecurity, and that's why we have developed this biocheck scoring system. It is available in many different languages, including Spanish, for instance, and for different animal species. So we have a biocheck for pigs, we have a biocheck for poultry, and we have different biochecks for dairy cattle, veal calves, and beef cattle. And what is important is that it is totally free for use. And so whoever is interested, you can simply go to this website, biocheck.ugent.be, and you can go to the questionnaires and you can fill in the questionnaires totally without any costs. And so it's absolutely free for use. And it is used also in your regions. We've seen it used in Argentina, in Brazil, in Mexico. So there's many countries also in your regions that have already used this biocheck system for the different animal species. And at this stage, it is used in more than 70 different countries. And we have over 28,000 data entries. So over 28,000 different farms that have filled in the questionnaire. And this big data set and this very fast growing data set also allows us to evaluate the average biosecurity level in the different countries. So if you have a country where the biocheck is used quite regularly, and we are able to to calculate national averages, national levels of biosecurity, which will allow you to compare the specific situation on one farm with the averages in your country. And that's why the system is so helpful. You do an evaluation of the farm, you get a report, I'll show it in a minute, and then you can compare the scores that you get out of the report between different herds. But you can also compare some scores between different countries if you want to see where your country is in regard to your neighboring countries, maybe. Also, you can use it to evaluate the improvement in the scores over time for specific farms. Or if you have a group of farms within a company, you want to evaluate the quality of the biosecurity in each and every different farm. You can do a biocheck on every farm. It takes you around half an hour work in every farm to do the biocheck. And then you can immediately compare these different production units, these different farms, to see where they are in their level of biosecurity and to see where the weak points are, and the points that needs improvement. And to do so, the biocheck system is unique in the fact that it is a risk-based scoring system. And so every question, it's based on a questionnaire, you fill in the questions, but the answers will get different weights depending on their importance. And remember my introduction from low risk to high risk. And so dependent on the importance, you will get different weights. And those are also based on scientific research. So to determine the importance of these different risks. So to go to the biocheck, as I said before, you go to our website and there you get these surveys, and these surveys are divided into questions on external biosecurity, everything we do to avoid that pathogens come into our farm. And internal biosecurity, that's everything we do to avoid that pathogens will spread within the farm, from one production unit to the other. We also look at different subcategories. So I'll show it in the report. And per subcategory, we have multiple questions. And whenever you filled it in, you get this report, as you can see it here, a report with your scores going from 0 to 100%. If it's 100%, it's a perfect situation. You've done everything right. You've done everything you had to do in terms of biosecurity. If it's only 40%, it means that you have a lot of things you can improve. And if you have red numbers, it means that you're below your country average. If you have black numbers, it means that specific farm is above the country average. So you see, you're always compared to your country average or to the world average. So to show a little bit further, these different reports gives you information on the external biosecurity, and this is a report for poultry, for broilers, and you get the score on the purchase of the measures you take with regard to the purchase of the one-day-old chicks, with regard to the feed and the water, with regard to the removal of the manure, and so on. All these different components are scored, and if I had to advise this farm, I get this report, well, I immediately see that in this farm, something should be done with regard to the material supply. That there something is, this score is quite low. Also, the score on cleaning and disinfection on this farm is relatively low. And so these are the things where we can make improvements, and where you can, at this specific farm, where you can give advices on how they can improve the situation. It is also, the report is also translated in these spider diagrams to give you exactly the same information. So it's a very efficient tool to quantify the biosecurity levels on your farm. It shows you, it elucidates the strong and the weak points at the farm, and it helps to prioritize for improving and monitoring your biosecurity status. So this biocheck system is really an advisory tool, a support tool to help to prioritize. We have the basic usage, which is free, totally free for use, as I said. For those of you that are using it or wanting to use it very frequently, you can also become an advanced user, and then you have to pay a little fee to use it. But in that situation, you can make groups, you get advanced reports, advisory reports that are created for you automatically based on the specific farm situation. You can compare your farms with other farms within your company, for instance. You can also get a trajectory on improvements. You can share your outcome. And so as an advanced user, you can do a lot of different things. And this is an example of an advanced report that is automatically generated or with some pictures in it. And if you create such a report, rather than working a couple of hours to create it, with our Biocheck system, this report is created automatically for you, and you can use it to advise much better your clients. So it's really a support for farm advisors to give good advices. This is about the comparison. I'll skip this a little bit, but when you're an advised user, you can also make your own goals rather than to benchmark against the national averages. You can say, well, in my company, the national average is not good enough. I want to do better. Well, you can set your own goals in terms of what you want to achieve. And then you can see whether your farm is reaching the goals, yes or no. This is an evaluation over time of the scores, this trajectory analysis, to show you that a farm is improving on or not improving on biosecurity. So how do we use this Biocheck? Typically, we're going to make an appointment with the farm. We do a farm visit. We go through the survey. Often we even do this on paper, and later on we fill it in on the computer at the office. And based on this, we generate a report. We generate an advice based on the filling in of the questionnaires, the outcome, the report we get. We can generate an advice. You can go back to the farm and you can come with really very farm-specific advices, really trying to work on the most important measures first. And then you can do follow-up visits to see how the farm is improving. Finally, to help you to learn more about biosecurity, we also have e-learning modules. If you go to our website, if you become an advanced user, you have directly access to our already 7 different e-learning modules on specific components of biosecurity. You can also access them through our website. And we also have a YouTube channel with different videos explaining you some components of biosecurity in a very short and very easy understandable message. With this, I want to thank you for your attention. I think I've talked a little bit longer than what was foreseen, but I hope it fulfilled your expectations. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask them. Thank you very much.
Obrigado pela excelente apresentação, Dr. De Wolf. A partir desse momento, então, iniciamos com o nosso momento de interação. Por favor, podem enviar as perguntas via chat, para que o Dr. De Wolf possa responder aos seus questionamentos.
A primeira pergunta veio da Gabriela Salazar. Ela pergunta se o Biocheck está disponível em português.
Unfortunately, well, I will check immediately, but I don't think we have the Portuguese version yet. I'm checking here at the spot. No, we don't know. We have it in Spanish, I knew that, but we don't have it yet in Portuguese. So yeah, we're always looking for partners that are willing to help in translating the questions. So whenever somebody feels attracted to that idea, feel free, because we want to expand our language availabilities.
Aproveitando o link, uma outra pergunta relacionada ao biocheck. O biocheck ele é baseado em riscos e pesos. A cada variável existe um peso. Isso é um padrão dentro do sistema biocheck, ou ele pode ser customizado de acordo com a característica de produção de cada país?
No, so you cannot customize the scores that are attributed to the risks. So these scores are fixed, but we are working on further developments of the biocheck system, where we're gonna make the weights and the risks context dependent, and meaning that in specific situations or linked to the intensity of the production area, linked on the presence of wildlife, linked to the size of the farm, for instance, that we can make or we can adapt the weights that are used in the system. But currently, the weights are fixed. But having said that, again, it is used in different countries throughout the world, and people feel really quite happy with the way it works. So if you feel a little bit uncertain on whether these weights are valid for your specific situation, I can only advise you to test it, to use it. Again, it's free for use, so you don't have to pay for it. And you can test it to see whether it might apply to your situation, and maybe it performs better than you would think.
E aproveitando esse gancho, professor, qual seria a frequência adequada para fazer uma auditoria nas granjas de aves e suínos?
Yeah, it's a good question. What we typically would do is every 6 months. So we go there, we do an evaluation, we give advices, and then you really need to allow yourself, or you need to allow the farmer a bit of time to adapt. So if you go too early, things will not have changed enough. So a framework of 6 months is likely what you need. If you go too late, yeah, then there is not enough motivation for the farmer to do the work. So a period of 6 months should be okay.
Ok, temos aqui mais uma pergunta. Foi falado em testar a eficácia de um programa de desinfecção. Como nós podemos fazer para testar essa eficácia do nosso processo de desinfecção?
Yeah, there are several methods. Typically, or the basic method is what we do with the contact plates. So it's these Petri dishes that are pressed against the surface, and then they are grown in a simple bacterial growth system. And after 1 or 2 days, you can read the number of colonies on your contact plate, and that will tell you something about the level of contamination. There's a lot of more sophisticated systems where you go with swabs to see how contaminated your area is. We are also investigating the use of ATP Petri systems. They're not standardized so much yet, but there's some that claim that they can work very well with that. So at this stage, I use mainly these contact plates to see. Important is when you do the contact plating that you select the right places to see whether your disinfection was done right. So go for those places where there are little cracks or under the drinkers or behind the feeding troughs, the places that are a bit more difficult to reach, because also there you want to have a good and an effective cleaning and disinfection.
Considerando os riscos de baixo ou alto risco de acordo com a fonte de contaminação, como saber qual a falha de biosseguridade está envolvida com o desafio sanitário presente na granja?
Yeah, there is no exact way to do that, so you cannot go back and see exactly what was the route of introduction or transmission. The virus will not tell you, or the bacteria will not tell you how they came in, but yeah, the levels of risks and the scores that we have attributed, they are coming from a lot of scientific studies where they did epidemiological studies to compare multiple farms, and then you see those farms that take these measures have a reduced risk. The ones that do not take the measures have an elevated risk. So it's much more based on these environmental studies or these epidemiological studies rather than to be able to trace that back on one specific farm. Sometimes you know that something went wrong and a specific person came in that was contaminated or something, but that is rather the exception than the rule.
Professor, o controle de vetores, ele é importante dentro de um sistema, de um programa de biosseguridade. Tá? Que importância teriam as moscas falando-se em biosseguridade?
Yeah, flies may also transmit several diseases. Especially if they are biting mosquitoes, that they bite the animals to drink blood. In that process, they can transmit a lot of infections. So they are important, especially if there's other farms in the close neighborhoods. If your nearest neighbor is multiple kilometers away from you, the flies will not cross that long distance. So it depends a little bit on the situation. If you have wildlife in the neighborhood, wild animals around you, they may also be a source of infection. So the flies can feed on the wild animals, and then they can get into the stables and feed on the domestic animals and transmit diseases. So the flies are really, depending on your context, there might be a substantial risk. And yeah, then also try to keep them out or try to limit the number of flies that you have on a farm. Besides the disease transmission, flies are also just annoying for the animals. They can also become a welfare issue for the animals.
Foi apresentado sobre baixo risco diante de uma alta frequência, mostrando o impacto que tem os caminhões como fonte de transmissão e falha de biosseguridade. Que impacto teria através dos caminhões para essas granjas de animais? Se houver uma falha na biosseguridade desses veículos.
Yeah, well, the risk is that through the truck, the pathogens can be brought into your farm. And so, yeah, if you do not properly clean and disinfect it, the pathogens can come into the farm through the truck.
E aproveitando essa esse questionamento sobre o risco dos caminhões. Tá? Qual é o risco das pessoas, tá, em introduzir novas doenças dentro de um sistema de produção? Seja através de visitas técnicas, ou seja até mesmo em uma falha em carregamentos de animais, onde o funcionário tem contato com o animal. Tá? Esse risco ele é quantificado?
Encontrei isso na internet sobre...
Again, that's a very difficult question to answer. It depends on multiple, different diseases are transmitted in different ways. So I cannot give you a general percentage like 5% of the diseases are introduced or 10% or whatever. It will depend enormously on which diseases are present on your farm and which the amount of people coming into a farm. But it is definitely true that people are very high risks. So they can bring a lot of diseases, and it's not the person as such, but it is the person who is carrying a lot of organic material. And in this organic material, there might be viruses, parasites, bacteria that are brought into your farm. So it is beyond discussion that people really can bring in a lot of pathogens. I cannot put an exact number on it, but I did explain you all the measures you should take to prevent the people bringing in these infections in your farm.
Professor, tem mais uma pergunta da Gabriela Bermudez, falando dos termos de biocontenção e bioexclusão, que já fazem parte da biosseguridade na América Latina, e que percentual desses de granjas realmente que percentual de granja que consideram esses termos de biocontenção e bioexclusão?
I do not really understand the question.
Perdão, para falar sobre os termos de biocontenção e bioexclusão. O que ele entende por isso?
Okay, yeah, well, I don't use those terms very frequently. I use external and internal biosecurity, which is much more easy to understand. Biocontainment is to avoid that pathogens come into your farm, and bioexclusion is to avoid that they go out of your farm. But both are actually included in the idea of external biosecurity. And external biosecurity, you can think about, you have a farm and you build a shield around it. So you build a shield around the farm to avoid that anything comes in or anything goes out. And that is what we want to do with external biosecurity. The other component is the internal biosecurity, and internal biosecurity is everything, all the measures you take within your farm to avoid that the pathogens go from one stable to the next stable, from one age group to the next age group. So it's much more easy for me to talk about external and internal biosecurity rather than to talk about biocontainment, bioexclusion, there's other difficult words to be used, but they explain the same thing actually.
Tem mais uma pergunta de Manuel Fernandes. Você mencionou que não era necessário tomar uma ducha para ingressar em granja, pero em caso de granjas de reprodutores, seria muito perigoso. Se os trabalhadores não têm algum animal criado em casa, por exemplo. Não seria muito perigoso se alguns trabalhadores tivessem esses animais criados em casa, sem o banho?
Well, know if they take all the measures, saying they change their clothes, they wash their hands, and they change their footwear, then you have limited almost all the risks. I'm not against showering. If you have a good installation, there is nothing wrong with asking everybody to take the shower, as long as you are 100% sure that they do it. Because sometimes I see showering is a lot of work, it takes time, and after some months or years, they stop using the shower and they just walk through with their dirty clothes and with their dirty footwear, and then it becomes really dangerous. So sometimes it's better to make your measures a bit more simple and a bit more easy, but to insist on the fact that they are applied perfectly, rather than to have very, very high level of measures, but then you have a lot of mistakes in the application. But if you're sure that the shower is applied very well, and you have a walk-through shower, then it's a good idea, and just keep on doing it. So I do not advise you to stop using the shower.
Professor, temos aqui uma pergunta bem interessante do Rodrigo, onde ele pergunta se o biocheck ele é utilizado em algum país para mensurar a vulnerabilidade de introdução de novos agentes em determinado país?
Well, it's not evaluating the biosecurity at country level. It's evaluating the biosecurity at farm level. So it's not really giving you a country effect, but of course, if we have a good evaluation of the biosecurity at farm level for many farms within the country, the average scores that you obtain will also tell you something about the vulnerability at the country level. In Europe, we have several countries that are using the biocheck systematically. Every farm has to fill it in at least once a year. And so in those countries, Ireland, Finland, Belgium, Italy, we have a lot of data about the level of biosecurity. And based on this, we really have also a lot of data on the vulnerability of the whole country, of the whole sector in the country. So it can be used also for that way, but then you need to have a lot of farms that have filled in the system.
Ok, muito obrigado, professor De Wolf. Devido ao nosso adiantado do tempo, os questionamentos que não puderem ser respondidos neste momento vão ser encaminhados para o senhor, e essas respostas elas serão devolvidas aos participantes através do e-mail cadastrado. Então, agradecemos a sua participação e a excelente exposição que foi realizada no nosso webinar.
Obrigada, professor De Wolf, pela participação. É uma oportunidade também para a gente poder migrar o biocheck para o português, então manteremos contato. E agradecemos também a participação de todo mundo que participou conosco durante esse evento. Trabalho também dos bastidores, de todo mundo que está fazendo esse evento acontecer, das tradutoras. Então, agradecer a todo mundo, e a gente dá por encerrada nesse momento no módulo 4, e a gente se encontra dia 17 de novembro, no mesmo horário, com o quinto e último módulo dessa série de webinar do SanTalks, de Biosseguridade. Dia 17 de novembro, nós vamos falar sobre o tema O que temos de novas oportunidades em biosseguridade. Sigam as nossas redes sociais, sigam as redes sociais da Sanfar para ficar por dentro de novas atividades, das novidades, perdão, e a gente espera por vocês e até a próxima. Olá, obrigada, até a próxima.
Obrigado a todos e até